On our newscast tonight, some encouraging news for the Korean economy and its people. Korea posted a current account surplus for the 20th straight month in September. And thousands of households behind on their loan repayments can now let out a sigh of relief thanks to a national debt relief program. And while efforts to bring about a diplomatic solution to the North Korean nuclear issue are ongoing, Pyongyang has shown that it's unwilling to let go of its military ambition. New satellite imagery shows they may be trying to upgrade their missile capabilities. First Germany and now Spain. The two European nations expressed anger over U.S. surveillance activities in their respective nations. The U.S. is reviewing its policies, but emphasizes that the activities were crucial in identifying and stopping terrorist plots. These stories and more coming up, so stay with us.
It is 5 a.m. in Washington, 1 p.m. in Tbilisi, and 6 on a Tuesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. We begin with some upbeat news on the country's trade front.
That's correct. Korea's current account balance has been in the black for the 20th straight month in September, with receipts exceeding payments by well over $6 billion.
Economists are also upwardly revising their forecast for the Korean economy. Our economics correspondent Hwang Ji-hye starts us off.
The Bank of Korea said Tuesday that the surplus in September's trade of goods and services stood at over $6.5 billion, up by nearly $1 billion from the previous month. This is the 20th straight month for Korea to post a current account surplus, reflecting reduced working days for September when factories were closed for several days to mark Chuseok, or Korea's Thanksgiving holidays. Exports of goods fell 2.7% from a year earlier to $46 billion, while imports dropped 3.5% to $40 billion. The service account, which includes tourism and shipping, also totaled to a surplus of around $870 million in September, following a surplus of $100 million in the previous month. With signs that both exports and domestic spending will improve in coming months, local and foreign brokerage houses are raising their projections for the Korean economy for this year and next year. Japanese firm Nomura has revised up its 2013 growth outlook for Korea to 2.9% from its earlier forecast of 2.7%. It maintains its 4% growth projection for next year, the most optimistic forecast among major brokerage houses. Samsung Securities has also raised its growth outlook by 0.4 percentage points for this year and by 0.3 percentage points for next year. The move by brokerage houses came after the Bank of Korea said last week that the nation's gross domestic product rose 3.3% in the third quarter of this year from a year earlier, the fastest pace of expansion in nearly 2 years. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
So things do look good on the macro level, but on a micro level, not so much, as you might expect, given the sheer number of people with debt issues in Korea. The government's debt relief program, dubbed the National Happiness Fund, has been extremely popular since its launch earlier this year. Well, officials say they expect the total number of beneficiaries to top 600,000 by the end of the year. Here's our Kim Young-gil with this report.
President Park Geun-hye's National Debt Relief Program, the National Happiness Fund, is aimed at helping low-income debtors handle their loan repayments. The fund helps households behind on their loan repayments to write off up to 70% of their debts and pay back the rest over a period of 10 years. So far, around 210,000 people have applied for the program, and at this rate, officials expect the total number of beneficiaries to top 600,000 by the end of the year. The Financial Services Commission says that as of October, around 190,000 delinquent borrowers have benefited from the fund. An official said that although individuals can't apply for debt relief programs directly to the government from next month, the fund will continue the programs through financial institutions for the next 5 years. However, some say that while the debt relief program is a helpful way to help low-income people get out of debt, people may start to regard the fund as a government handout to people who try to live beyond their means. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And quite the opposite from debt is savings. Well, today marks the 50th anniversary of the country's Savings Day. The tendency to save up for the future or just for a rainy day has played a large part in Korea's transformation into an advanced economy over the last few decades. However, the rate at which Koreans tuck money away has tumbled in recent years, as our Yoo reports.
Members of the Women's Savings Federation have taken to the streets, calling on everyone to get a savings bank book.
This is a scene from a savings campaign in Seoul some 40 years ago. Fast forward a few decades to this Tuesday, the 50th anniversary of Savings Day, which was first designated back in 1964. The nationwide movement for savings played a big role in transforming Korea from a nation of poverty into an advanced economy, with the nation's household savings rate rising from 5% in 1964 to over 24% by 1988. But as of last year, the figure has slumped to 3.4%. Out of the 25 OECD member states, Korea ranked in the bottom tier at 18th place as of 2011. So why are less Koreans saving? Well, for some, it's the high living expenses.
There's nothing to save. The education costs for my children and the price of goods are all too high. How can we save?
A drop in interest rates, especially since the Asian financial crisis, has also played a role.
The problem with low interest rates is that it induces people to create more debt rather than save. People spend by creating debt rather than through savings.
But businesses, on the other hand, are having an easier time. Their rate of savings has reached nearly 20%.
Ever since the global financial crisis, households' real wages have remained stagnant, while businesses' income has been rapidly increasing.
And while that may be good news for businesses and the Korean economy looking forward, the uphill climb to save continues for ordinary citizens. Given the rapidly aging population, experts also warn the low savings rate could place a heavy burden on retirees in the years to come. Yoo, Arirang News.
Well, at the National Assembly today, its Agriculture Committee met Tuesday for an audit of the Agriculture Ministry.
Where a heated debate surrounding the target price of rice, which lawmakers say is key for the survival of rice farmers and rice production, dominated the key discussions. Our Kim Hyun-ji reports.
Lawmakers sitting on the Parliament's Agriculture Committee demanded on Tuesday that the Agriculture Minister report on government plans to raise the target price of rice. In Korea, if local rice prices fall below a target price set by the government must guarantee farmers 85% of the difference between the two. A target price is set for 5 years, and the government needs the National Assembly's approval if it wants to change it. The Agriculture Committee had given the minister more than 2 weeks to prepare a briefing on what the government will do to raise the target price, which has been frozen at 170,000 won, or about $160 per 80 kilograms of rice, for the past 8 years. Agriculture Minister Lee Dong-pil said a plan to raise the target price by 2.4%, or about $4, is being considered, and added that an increase above that level is unlikely. Rice farmers attending the parliamentary audit jumped to their feet in response. They said that overall prices have risen 24% over the past 8 years, and said raising the target price by just 2.4% won't make any difference.
The agriculture minister didn't do anything but present a target price that was set 8 years ago. We don't even know how much prices will go up, but he is saying the target price will remain the same for the next 5 years. He doesn't seem to have a desire to improve the harsh conditions we face. It hurts me very much.
The government is wary of raising the target price, saying it will drive up rice production, which will place additional budgetary burdens on it. But my party believes the target price should go up, not simply to compensate the income losses of farmers, but to provide them a safety net they need in an increasingly competitive market with FTAs.
The lawmakers and the agriculture minister reached an impasse, and the audit came to an abrupt halt. Farmers want the target price raised to $217 per 80 kilograms, which they say is the minimum level that can sustain their rice production. Given the rate of inflation and the increase in production costs over the past 8 years, some lawmakers say the target price should go up to more than $300. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea, China, and the United States are stepping up efforts to bring about a diplomatic solution to the North Korean nuclear issue. China's top nuclear envoy Woo Da-wei is in Washington to discuss the matter with his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davis, while South Korean envoy Cho Tae-yong is scheduled to meet with Woo and Davis separately next month. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
China's top nuclear envoy, Woo Da-wei, began a two-day meeting with his U.S. counterpart, Glenn Davis, in Washington on Monday, stirring up speculation about a possible resumption of the six-party denuclearization talks. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said that Woo held productive discussions on issues related to North Korea with a number of senior diplomats in Washington. She added that the U.S. and China see eye to eye on the fundamental importance of denuclearizing the North and explained that Woo's visit is part of bilateral efforts to find a peaceful solution to the problem. The Chinese diplomat's trip, the first since April, represents Beijing's active efforts for reviving the long-stalled six-party talks involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia. Woo may try to persuade officials in Washington by referring to Pyongyang's change in attitude based on his meeting with his North Korean counterpart Kim Kye-kwan in Beijing last month. Some experts are hopeful about an acceleration in moves to resume the multilateral dialogue, as South Korea's top nuclear negotiator Cho Tae-yong is expected to visit Washington and Beijing next month. But nonetheless, the U.S. reiterated that the North must give up its nuclear program before returning to talks, adding that the ball lies in North Korea's court. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
A U.S. think tank says North Korea appears to be building several new facilities at its Dongchangli launch site, from which it fired a long-range rocket last December. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has this story.
Is North Korea trying to fire larger rockets and newer mobile missiles? Recent satellite imagery shows the reclusive regime is undertaking a major construction project at its Dongchangli launch site, its main missile launch site located on the northwestern coast, possibly to accommodate larger rockets. The U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies says that based on its analysis of the satellite imagery, it has spotted another new mobile launch pad, in addition to one it first identified in August. While the launch tower from which Pyongyang fired off its long-range Unha-3 rocket last December is being upgraded. New roads and bridges are also being built that connect the new launch pad to the launch tower. Pointing out that the new roads appear much wider and sturdier than existing ones, the Institute suggests that the roads may be used to support heavier vehicles, such as transporter-erector launchers for mobile missiles. The Institute predicts the North will complete the construction project by the middle of next year. But it also warns that the communist state could be ready to launch additional rockets at any given time, as construction on the new launch pad has the potential to be completed very soon. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Well, another chapter in the strained ties between Beijing and Tokyo. China has rejected a diplomatic protest from Tokyo over Chinese ships entering Japanese territorial waters around the disputed islands in the East China Sea. According to China's Global Times, Japan's foreign ministry lodged a formal protest with the Chinese embassy in Tokyo Monday after 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels entered waters off the islands called Diaoyu in China and Senkaku in Japan.
However, the Chinese embassy rejected the protest, saying that the small chain of uninhabited rocky islands are originally and historically Chinese sovereign territory. Relations between China and Japan took a turn in September 2012 when Tokyo nationalized 3 of the 5 major islands.
Now, Japan's defense minister says Beijing's attitude towards its row over disputed islands is jeopardizing peace in the region.
This just days after China warned that a reported plan to shoot down its drones would constitute an act of war. The two countries have been at loggerheads over the island chain, claimed by China as the Diaoyu and by Japan as Senkaku, since Tokyo bought 3 of them from a private Japanese owner in September 2012.
Now, China and Japan are walking on tightrope, and the role of Korea in all of this. Joining us in the studio to give us some perspective is Professor Kim Tae-hyun of the Graduate School of International Studies at Seoul-based Chungang University. Professor Kim, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, Japan's defense minister said, and let me quote you on this, that intrusions by China in the territorial waters around the Senkaku Islands fall in the gray zone between peacetime and an emergency situation. Now, these comments are likely to further heighten fears that the two countries could be slipping or sliding towards conflict over these outcrops in the East China Sea. Your assessment of the situation?
Because, for example, if you think of 2010 cases where a drunken captain of fishing boats ramming into Japanese patrol boats and triggered a diplomatic dispute, it was kind of minor issues. It's a kind of isolated issues. But this time, 2 governments are involved with higher-ranking officials, and with the jargon of international relations, they are playing, I guess, the dangerous game of power politics.
Right, the world is watching and neither side is going to back down. The heightening tension, I believe it's possibly at an all-time high between these two countries. And of course, this could impact the security situation in not just in Korea, but Northeast Asia as well, right?
Sure, not just in Northeast Asia, even East Asia in general. I mean, China and Japan are number 2 and number 3 economies in the world. In African proverb, there's a word like, when elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. That is, I think, exactly a very apt metaphor for the situation.
All right, of course, as we all know, China isn't the only country Japan has territorial disputes with. Of course, Tokyo has also been making erroneous claims to Korea-controlled Tokdo Islets as well. Now, how do you see island disputes in this part of the world playing out in the near future?
You know, things are interrelated, particularly those territorial issues are interrelated. So, for example, from Japanese perspective, if they make a concession on one issue, then the other party in other issues may expect some concessions as well. So that kind of interconnectedness may lead Japan take more firm or unyielding status in all of those territorial issues. So they are all tightly interrelated, and things are very hard to solve at this moment.
Right, there could be some chain of events, and they don't want to let other countries think, why not us, why not now? Well, shifting focus to military ambition from Japan, it's been making news recently. Apparently, the U.S. side, namely Kurt Campbell, he, of course, said he understands Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's military objectives, but then we all feel that we should be concerned about this shift in their military gear in Japan. It's possibly one of the reasons why it could boost Abe's very extreme far-right policy. What's your view on this shift in paradigm?
Okay, I mean, for the U.S. perspective, let's say, kind of balancing the rising power of China has been one of the policy priorities. So Japan has their long-time allies, so why not take advantage of those existing capabilities of Japan? Maybe the thinking in Washington, D.C., but I don't think that is a very wise idea. I think that is very short-sighted and narrow-minded, because Japanese constitution, peace constitution with Article 9, is not just a one-time issue. I mean, that it reflects the post-war settlement after the Second World War, where all those nations are involved. It is not, it seems like a U.S. choice at the time, but Russia was involved in the war, China was involved in the war, so you cannot just simply approach that one in that level.
Now, Professor Kim, Seoul, for its part, has not weighed in on the Sino-Japanese relations or tensions just yet, but Seoul's foreign ministry did reiterate its stance made back in 1997 that should Japan want to engage its self-defense forces on the Korean peninsula, it would need Korean consent. Now, what does this mean, and how should Korea deal with Japan in such an event?
All right, you mentioned 1997. I would give you some background about that. 1997 was about when North Korea, severe famine was killing million people and so on, and there was widespread speculation that North Korea may collapse at any time with over 1 million army is there. So United States and Japan was revising its defense cooperation guideline with the possible engagement in Korean Peninsula in mind. So at the time, because the issue was so grave, possibly North Korean collapse, but still South Korean government made it clear that any engagement by Japanese forces on the Korean Peninsula should get prior consent by the government. Now, so only 16 years passed after that. Government reiterate that point means the government is not ready to tackle the issues at this moment. Last year and so on, Korea-Japan relations was not very good. At that moment, things like that is taking place, so the government, without knowing what to do in change situations, just reiterated the policy that was made 16 years ago, that a safe approach, but not very good approach, I would say.
Professor Kim Tae-yeon of the Graduate School of International Studies of Chungang University, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me this night.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now, shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by... The White House has admitted for the first time that new constraints may be needed on the way the U.S. gathers and uses intelligence. The acknowledgement came after Spain became the latest country to protest U.S. spying on its citizens. Here's Arirang News' Kim Hyun-bin.
The White House said Monday that it will review its surveillance activities and consider toning down their scope, but emphasized that intelligence gathering played a crucial role in identifying and breaking up terrorist plots.
These capabilities are part of the reason we've been able to foil numerous terrorist plots and adapt to a post-9/11 security environment. At the same time, with new capabilities, we recognize that there need to be additional constraints on how we gather and use intelligence.
The Obama administration is coming under intense fire over allegations the U.S. National Security Agency tapped into German Chancellor Angela Merkel's mobile phone, as well as the phone calls, texts, and emails of hundreds of millions of people in France, Italy, Spain, and elsewhere.
We understand that this has caused concern in countries that represent some of our closest relationships internationally, and we are working to allay those concerns and to discuss these issues.
The admission came as Spain became the latest country to summon the U.S. ambassador to discuss the alleged spying on its citizens. Spanish newspaper El Mundo reported earlier this week that over 60 million phone calls made in Spain had been intercepted by the NSA between December 10, 2012 and January 8 this year. The Italian Daily also reported Monday that the NSA has spied on over 46 million of its citizens' phone calls and communications over a similar period. And in a related move, the German government is mulling plans to summon former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, who is currently under asylum in Russia, as a witness if allegations of the NSA spying on Angela Merkel goes to court. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
In Georgia, Georgy Margvelashvili has won a landslide victory in the presidential election, with many international observers praising the result as a step forward for democracy in that country. After all the votes were counted, the Central Election Commission announced on Monday that Margvelashvili from the ruling Georgian Dream Coalition, which ousted President Mikhail Saakashvili's government in a parliamentary election last year, won with 62.1% of the vote. Now, David Bakrzai, who was supported by the outgoing president, was the runner-up with 22%, and Nino Bruzanadze, a former parliamentary speaker, came third with 10%. Many European observers say this election was a positive and transparent one without the violence or irregularities that have plagued previous elections in the former Soviet Republic.
And that's all from us for this hour. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Gan-young. Thank you as always for being here with us. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you right back here same time tomorrow. Good night.